Hi everyone. Today is going to be something extra, a little bit different. We just got back from a trip to Europe and Vlad told me that just 3 days ago, Metallica released a new single from, I guess they're putting out an album coming up soon. And he said that the name was Lux Aeterna. And my ears perked up and I said, Lux Aeterna? Metallica? Well, you know, I've only listened to one Metallica piece in my life, and I was planning on returning to it, but I didn't have it scheduled yet. But I said, I have to hear that piece. I want to hear what they did with that title. It's, for me as a classical musician, it puts very strong ideas in my mind. And so I'm very curious what they've done with it and how they've taken this and worked it into their own thing. And Vlad said, no, if you can't listen to it unless we record it. So here I am. I'm doing a first listen just because I'm desperate to hear what they've done with this title. I want to tell you a bit about why this title is so interesting to me. Well, it's because in classical music, Lux Aeterna is a portion of the Requiem Mass. And Requiem Masses have been composed by composers from long before Mozart, all the way beyond Elgar and beyond. And so we have lots and lots and lots of pieces of music called Lux Aeterna, fitting within various requiems in our classical world of music. So, of course, the one piece I listened to, which was And Justice for All, let me know that Metallica doesn't take an idea and leave it as the idea from which it was drawn. They rework it, and I'm very curious to see what they do with this title. Lux Aeterna means, it comes from the Latin, of course, and it means eternal light. And so, what do they do with that idea, eternal light? That's what I'm about to find out. And I'm going to listen to it, I'm going to see what they do with it, and then I'll let you know what I think at the end. Okay, so far, I've heard several things that are interesting to me musically. It has a very, I guess, like And Justice for All, it has a very fast, dynamic pace to it, which, of course, is nothing like the Lux Aeterna musical concepts that I come from. But it's interesting to take it that way. And they have this intro, which is this stepping down chromatic little figure. I'm not sure if it's quite enough to call it a riff, but... And then we come to what they notate as being the main riff right here. And I stopped in the middle of that section just to let you know that I was noticing those things. So I'm going to back up just a little bit and we'll see if we can start somewhere around the beginning of this main riff. And I like the fact that the music is notated saying main riff, because then I know that that is something that is going to feature in the piece and I can kind of keep my ears out for it. Here we go.
Magnification, all generations approaching the
That is so funny. Do you hear what they're doing with the pronunciation? They've even changed the pronunciation. It's not Lux Aeterna, it's Lux Aeterna. And that to me is so hilarious sounding. Let's go a bit more. I'm going to back up just a little bit. Lux Aeterna! So so far, I'm almost picking up most of the lyrics, and I'll get to those at the end of the piece. So I'm not going to talk about the lyrics yet. I'm just listening to the musical effect, and it sounds very, shall I say, standard from what I've been exposed to with metal and this branch of rock music, in the way it has these driving rhythms and short little motifs, riffs. That's what I was looking for. And I'm noticing that the music is setting up this very, well, I'm no expert yet on this kind of music, but to me, it starts to feel very classic, very, very standard, in the sense that it doesn't sound like they're trying to do anything terribly new here. Instead, they're taking these elements and they are, at least so far in the song, they are using them very effectively. A lot of you have messaged me about the rhythmic element, and you've mentioned the headbanging effect. And you've asked me, do you ever just really feel like getting into some honest to goodness headbanging? And I understand what you're saying. It's not my usual way of relating to music, and so it doesn't feel perfectly natural to me, personally. But in this music, I can hear that they're setting up this very strong headbanging effect. Not only that, their verse, little bit of melody, if we can call it such, is really quite catchy and memorable in a way that makes it easy to pick up and sing along with it. I've only heard one verse, and we're just getting to the next verse here, but I could probably already sing along with it. That is not a mark of mediocrity. That is a mark of mastery, where you can take these simple elements and really set them up in a way that pulls people into it and makes them go along with it and be able to participate easily in the experience. So far, we've had a standard intro with kind of an introductory idea, getting the music going, and then we had the main riff introduced, and then we had the first verse, which has that very singable, catchy little tune. And then after that, we have this little interlude, and now we're ready for verse 2. And let's just start round about verse 2 and see what comes next. Frenzy sensation, kindred alliance connected inside. Commiseration, sonic salvation, cast out the demons and strangle your life. Full speed or nothing, full speed or nothing. Lux Aeterna, Lux Aeterna, yeah. Lux Aeterna! Oh boy. Okay, and now we're back to the main riff. What a crazy, wild solo here. But more than that, I'm impressed with how well it flowed. It was linked to what came before and what came after. It wasn't like the guitar solo was just placed, dropped in the middle, unrelated to, disconnected from everything else. And I remember the very first Metallica piece I listened to, and Justice for All. And that solo really challenged me. I'd never heard anything like it in my life. I've heard a few pieces along the way, various bands, since then. And so this one doesn't feel so just disorienting and like it, like I don't know how to make sense of it. I really had to work to find my way into that first guitar solo in And Justice for All. But now here, this one, I've heard enough that I can say that I see how it works together and I can appreciate it and enjoy it even on the very first listening. One of the things that I wanted to point out as we enter the solo here is that we have these really, really, really fast notes that are taking off like crazy, but it's using melodic material, or at least motivic material, riff material, whatever you want to call it, from earlier in the piece. And so it's not completely on its own. And that's one of the things that helps to join it and link it. At the same time, it propels it forwards into all the excitement of the solo itself. And then as we go through the solo, it does all its wonderful things. And it feels kind of like a mini concert on its own. And that's kind of cool. I'm going to get to the lyrics, which I have some ideas about the lyrics already. But I'm going to talk about that after we get through the rest of the song. And I think that this guitar solo has a connection to the lyrics, even though there are no lyrics being sung here. And then, of course, we get to the end of the solo, and it seamlessly goes back into this kind of chunk, 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 pound, 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 pound rhythm, which we heard at the end of the first main riff moment. So it's being used as glue here to carry us back in and signal to us that now we're getting ready to hear the next section of the piece. Very nicely constructed from an analytical, technical perspective. But not only that, it's aurally satisfying. It works well, not just on paper, but in the aural experience of it. Okay, let's go on. We have just gotten back to the main riff, which suggests to me that probably we have another verse coming up. Here we are, back with the descending chromatic element which we heard at the beginning, which wasn't really part of the main riff, but again, it was kind of part of the introduction. And now it's coming back. It pulls everything together and is, I see on the track that we're getting close to the end, but I can also hear, because this is kind of wrapping it up. It's like you have an item and you put it in a box and you put the tape on and then you put the ribbon on and tie it up. This is kind of the tying of the ribbon that is finishing up the piece in its package. So let's start here a little bit. That was kind of fun. And maybe you wouldn't have expected me to say that on my second exposure to something Metallica, because I'm not even that big of a metal fan, as you all know. But it was kind of fun. And I wouldn't say that this piece has any massive development that I haven't heard in music before. But music doesn't have to be always avant-garde in order to be effective, in order to be really fine music. This kind of reminds me of, I could say, folk songs or other types of simple music. The form, the format, the structure, the design is very simple, and it doesn't need a lot in order to do what it does. And so all that they've done is they've taken these elements and they have worked them together in a very nicely crafted, well-organized little package, and it fits. It works very well. Let's go to the lyrics a bit, because I was listening to the lyrics, but I wanted to wait until the end. I remember my first listen to Metallica as well. I listened to those lyrics and I realized they've put a lot of work into crafting the lyrics and expressing their ideas and choosing the language and the structure of how they're going to say what they want to say. And so again today, my second time hearing something by Metallica, this was in my mind as something that I wanted to pay attention to and see, do they still do that? Or how are they doing it now? Have they changed? What is their topic? What is their focus? Those sorts of things. And I'm reading through these lyrics here, and they like big words. They like multi-syllable words. Anticipation, indomination, magnification, all generations, exhilaration, frenzied sensation. They've set this up in a very organized and consistent way so that the lyrics themselves have a sort of musical sound. If I read off one of the verses, it has a musical rhythm and quality. Anticipation in domination, a sea of hearts beat as one, unified. Magnification, all generations, approaching thunder, awaiting the light. But then we sit back and say, all right, they sound nice. What on earth do they mean? Because, as I mentioned before, Lux Aeterna, from my perspective, from my background, is part of a religious work, part of a musical expression that the Requiem is basically a mass for the dead. So it goes through a whole series of various movements and everything from prayers for the dead to moments when we imagine that they are meeting their judgment with the Almighty, and so on and so forth. So Lux Aeterna, eternal light, is very often a peaceful or heavenly quality, we could say, sound. And I'll link a couple of those from the classical tradition below this video so that you can listen to those and see where I'm coming from with this idea. But obviously, as I expected, Metallica has taken it somewhere else. And as I'm looking through these lyrics and as I was listening, I was thinking, what are they really saying? Is this just a bunch of nice sounding words? But surely they have something they want to communicate here. And I haven't sat with this music a long time. I haven't gone over these lyrics thoroughly, deeply at this point. So this is just my first impression of what this song is about. As I'm reading through, I see them starting by talking about anticipation, a sea of hearts beating as one. I feel like the first verse is talking about the whole world, all of humanity, and not only those of us who are alive right now, but all generations. And then this idea of full speed or nothing, Lux Aeterna, what is this? Moving on to the next verse, it talks about exhilaration and frenzied sensation, something we feel. Kindred alliance connected inside. So now we feel this connection to what came in the first verse, all the world. And then the verse goes on, commiseration. Commiseration? Commiseration? Why? Why do we need to commiserate together? Sonic salvation. Okay, and this is where my ears perked up and said, there's the first link I see between the requiems and the Lux Aeterna music that I know and this one. Because as I said, it's a religious work from the classical background. Sonic salvation, cast out the demons that strangle your life. This is talking about some sort of salvation, some sort of saving or redemption or something happening here. But they don't quite tell us what it is yet. But I guess this is the thing that makes me see the sense in the choice of the word Lux Aeterna. Because here we are dealing with something that has a religious background, but now it's being presented in a non-religious set of ideas, but still it has something to do with salvation and all of humanity, and not just those of us who are living, but all who came before us. That's interesting to me. And then, of course, we have full speed or nothing, Lux Aeterna, so on it goes. And this third verse is the one that was the key for me when I heard it, to think, as I was listening, not just to the music, but to the lyrics as well, what is this thing that is being chosen, identified as the eternal light, the means of salvation, the means of connection as well? Emancipation, kill isolation, amplification. What does amplification mean to you? To me, especially in the rock context, I think of turning up the sound, lightening the nation, never alive more than right here tonight. And my first impression is that this is talking about the experience of hearing music. Not only hearing music, but hearing music live in concert with people. there's a connection. And it seems like, just again, my first impressions right here, right now, this Lux Aeterna is telling us that music has a way of connecting us, binding us together, giving us a common experience, and also helping us fight our demons, our own personal demons. As I was listening to the music a moment ago, hearing all of this, going through it, and getting my first impressions, remember I mentioned the headbanging effect and the kind of strong pull you into the experience vibe. And I think that this is a really interesting way of talking about what so many of you have told me is the experience of being in a live rock concert. That's my first impression. I have no idea if that's really what they intended. That's just what I have found here in this first listen experience, but I kind of like it. I like it because it talks about music and how music is such a gift to all of us and all of us together. And it's pulling us together, whether it's rock music or classical music or metal music, or there are things within it that pull us together and bind us and help us. And I think that's fabulous. And now about the pronunciation, Lux Aeterna, which I am sitting laughing inside of myself right now still, having heard it sung that way. I pronounce it Lux Aeterna. I cannot bring myself to pronounce it Lux Aeterna. It's just not in me. It's kind of funny though, and kind of interesting, because they're taking this whole traditional thing and reframing and reshaping it and giving it its own identity. Lux Aeterna, really. Why do I pronounce it Lux Aeterna? Well, of course, because it's Latin. And as a classical musician, well, Latin is the language in which most classical music lyrics have been written in because of its history of coming from the religious traditions of Western Europe. So, I'm familiar with classical Latin use in music. Having said that, it's kind of like the reason I can't bring myself to call this piece Lux Aeterna. It's the same reason I can't bring myself to call somebody Jürgen if their name is Jürgen. Or somebody, I can't say, hey Francois, how are you today? Instead of Francois. It just doesn't sit right with me. Now, of course, we kind of had this discussion back when I first heard Van Halen, and many of you said, no, the band is named Van Halen. And so there was this whole dynamic discussion going on in our community on YouTube here, which I found really fascinating and interesting to hear the different perspectives and all. So we're kind of back to the same thing here. Lux Aeterna, Lux Aeterna. I am American. And in America, it seems we have a tradition of remaking names. Even, well, here's one that Vlad jokes about. San Luis. He can't bring himself to say St. Louis. San Luis. And I'm American, and I know the city as St. Louis. And I keep telling him, it's St. Louis, and nobody will know what you're talking about unless you say St. Louis. Now, of course, I am certain that Metallica is not ignorant of the Latin pronunciation. So I'm asking myself right here, right now, why did they choose to pronounce it Lux Aeterna? What is this? It must be intentional. It can't just be carelessness. Obviously, they've put this piece together very carefully and systematically, and they've thought through every detail. And in creating this kind of classic format, easily identifiable, easily singable, to represent what music does and the experience of the concert. And so I'm trying to imagine and think, why did they choose it this way? Well, in this moment, I can think of a couple things. First of all, what they've done is if they have taken something classic and traditional from the past and brought it to the present and modernized it in a way that makes it not only pull everyone from the past in with us, as the lyrics said, what was it, all generations, but also they are signifying that they are bringing us all together into a common experience regardless of nationality, regardless of tradition, religious affiliation, anything like that. This is a common uniting experience. Again, the idea that of sonic salvation. Music saves us. Saves us from what? It seems like they're saying it saves us from fragmentation, from breaking apart, from being separated, perhaps even at war with each other, all of those things. So music is the salvational element. And Lux Aeterna. Now, I said I can't bring myself to say it that way, but as this is just going through my mind right now, I'm thinking, I kind of like it. It's a new way of taking something old and freshening it and giving it a new meaning. Also, this concept, which many people have a difficult time seeing how it really works out in real life, but this concept of America being a melting pot, a unifying place where everybody is welcome and everybody can be, can find a place and live and work together. Of course, that's very idealized. I understand that. But I'm thinking of this here, and this very Americanized expression, Lux Aeterna, might be symbolizing and communicating to us all around the world that music also is a melting pot, a place to bring us together, to bind us, connect us, and make us one family, essentially. One world, one soul, one experience. And so you can see my mind is turning right now. I'm playing with this. Even from when I started listening to now, I'm going to be thinking about this for a few days because to me it is fascinating. It's interesting. That's where it is right now. And so in closing, I will say I love this idea of music being something that is there for every single one of us and connects every single one of us in some way. And so I'm going to say, Lux Aeterna, light it. I'll see you soon.